I was standing on the front porch of our colonial in Lakewood Heights when my husband, Derek Lawson, hurled the divorce papers at my chest so hard they slapped like a punishment. The pages scattered across the wooden steps, fluttering in the warm Thursday sun. He didn't even try to lower his voice. "You have 36 hours to get out," he said, loud enough for the entire cul-de-sac to hear. "Tessa owns this house now. You leave with nothing." Ava neighbors froze mid-errand. Mr. and Mrs. Walker paused beside their SUV, grocery bags hanging from their fingers. A teenage girl on rollerblades stopped rolling, and some man down the street actually lifted his phone recording, like this was entertainment instead of my life cracking open. Derek stepped aside from the doorway as if he were a bouncer escorting me out of my own home. A suitcase sat by his leg, not his mine, already packed, already zipped, already positioned like trash he planned to drag to the curb. I should have crumbled. Sobbed, screamed. That's what he expected. Instead, I smiled. Just a tight, cool curve of my mouth. Then I asked, just loud enough for the audience he invited, "When exactly did Tessa Monroe sign the deed?" I must have missed that transfer. Mind sending me the updated copy for the Collins Family Trust? Derek's expression flickered, confusion, panic, something sour tightening behind his eyes. Whispers rippled through the cluster of neighbors. Someone actually gasped. His entire performance planned, polished, rehearsed for humiliation, tilted off balance. I bent down, picked up the divorce papers, dusted off the corner, and pushed past him into the house without another word. The door slammed shut behind me, cutting off the murmurs, the cameras, the curated shame he'd tried to brand me with. Inside, my face dropped its smile like a mask hitting the floor. I walked straight to the safe, hidden behind the framed photo from our wedding. I pressed my thumb to the lock, opened it, and pulled out the silver USB. Then my laptop, then the thick binder labeled Collins Family Trust, Restricted Asset Clause. Derek thought today was my downfall. He didn't know it was the day I stopped being the quiet wife who let things slide. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by someone who thought you'd stay silent. If you had driven past our house a year ago, you would have thought we were the kind of couple who had everything figured out. The freshly trimmed hedges, the white shutters, the porch swing. Derek insisted on repainting every spring Lakewood Heights perfection. People here cared about lawn symmetry and which school district boosted property value. They cared about brunch reservations and holiday cards. They cared about looking like they cared. And we were good at that game. Too good. Derek and I met 9 years ago at a networking mixer in downtown Raleigh. I still remember the air smelling like citrus from some cheap, over-enthusiastic diffuser, the room crowded with finance guys in navy suits. Derek stood out because he wasn't loud. He had that polished, quiet confidence, someone who looked like he believed life would always hand him the better deal. He told me we'd make a strong team. Not "I like you," not "I want to know you." A team. Like a merger. Like a contract. I should have heard the foreshadowing. But when you're young and ambitious, team sounds like partnership, safety, future. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. Not on a beach, not under fairy lights, no. He did it during dessert at a business dinner, sliding the ring over with a line that still burns when I recall it. "Ava, we're a win-win combination. Let's make it official." I laughed then. God. I really thought he was being romantic in his own awkward financial advisor way. My mother, Ellen, didn't laugh. She narrowed her eyes with that sharpness she earned from 30 years of rebuilding our lives after my father got conned by a charismatic wealth mentor. I was 12 then. I remember the foreclosure notices, the way Mom had to sell her wedding ring, whispering apologies into its gold band before handing it over. She made sure that wouldn't happen to me. She had one rule the day I married Derek: keep your inheritance in the Collins Family Trust. Never mingle it, no matter how in love you think you are, I argued. I told her Derek wasn't my father. She didn't budge. Protect what you build, she said. Protect who you are. So when Derek and I bought the Lakewood house 5 years ago, the colonial with the blue shutters he bragged about, I bought it through the trust. I didn't hide it. The documents were there. Derek just never asked. He assumed. He always assumed. Our marriage was polished on the outside. Sundays at the country club, where he schmoozed clients while I played the role of supportive wife, smiling through conversations about interest rates and vacation homes. Summer trips to Martha's Vineyard, where our couple photos got more likes than conversations we had in a week. Dinner parties where Derek held court, telling stories that made him look brilliant and me look steady. Behind closed doors, the cracks grew like mold. Little comments, little slices. Death by 1,000 well-manicured cuts. You overthink everything. You're too serious, clients like fun. You don't need to chase partnership. I make enough for both of us. Whenever something didn't add up, charges on our statements. Late nights at client dinners, the smell of perfume that wasn't mine. Derek flipped the script. Wow, you're digging through statements now? That's invasive. So now I can't shower after the gym without you interrogating me. This is what happens when a lawyer brings work-home paranoia, gaslighting so smooth it could have been bottled and sold. But the real shift came last September. Derek walked in 2 hours late, collar rumpled, smelling like gardenia. I've never worn gardenia in my life. He kissed my forehead, barely brushing my skin, and went straight to the shower. When he changed his shirt later, the collar was clean, too clean. I noticed everything. I always notice everything. My coffee cup, the porcelain white one with the tiny hairline crack, Mom warned, meant time reveals everything, was cooling between my palms as I sat at the kitchen island that night, staring at the credit card app on my phone. Scottsdale, Miami, Burlington, luxury spas, boutique hotels, charges at odd hours. I didn't cry. I didn't confront. I documented. Because something in me, the part raised by a woman who survived financial ruin, knew Derek wasn't just cheating. He was slipping. He was manipulated. Or he was manipulating. Or both. And then came her name, Tessa Monroe. She entered our lives like a wellness postcard. Blonde ponytail, perfect athleisure, all green smoothies and affirmations. Derek talked about her like she was a prophet in yoga pants. She's helping me optimize my life. She's teaching me discipline. She understands potential. But it was the invoices that told the real story. LBM Strategies, LLC. $15,000 over 4 months. For professional development consulting. Except LBM Strategies didn't exist. Not legally. Not online. Not anywhere. And the person who filed the LLC? A name I hadn't heard in 2 decades. A name that turned my stomach cold. Victor Hale. The same man who stole my father's last savings. The same man who disappeared after ruining 10 families. The same man who taught grifters how to build long con structures. And suddenly, my life wasn't just a failing marriage. It was a pattern repeating itself. A legacy of deception I refused to inherit. Derek thought he blindsided me. He didn't know he'd awakened the daughter of Ellen Collins. The night everything finally snapped into focus wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a lipstick stain or a mysterious receipt. It was quiet, too quiet. Derek had just come home from one of his late-night training sessions with Tessa. He dropped his gym bag by the door, kissed my cheek distractedly, and went upstairs to shower. I stayed at the kitchen table with my laptop open, the glow reflecting off that cracked porcelain coffee cup. The house was still, except for the sound of running water and Derek humming off-key, content, oblivious. That's when I pulled up the family plan location log. There it was again, the Hoboken address. A parking garage ping. A rooftop restaurant I knew he couldn't afford, even on a good year. The data was relentless, unemotional. It painted a picture clearer than any confession. But what struck me wasn't the betrayal. It was how systematic it all looked, like he was following a schedule, a rotation. Just like my father years ago, different women, seeking guidance, paying money to the same man who promised transcendence. My father thought he was chosen, special, seen, and when the fraud collapsed, he collapsed with it. I was watching Derek walk the same path, only this time he wasn't the con artist. He was the mark, one of them. I spent the next morning following the digital crumbs. Every Instagram post tagged number wellness journey. Every spa she visited for training. Every caption about empowerment. Then I found the testimonials on her sleek little website. 5 glowing stories from 4 women and 1 man praising her for life-changing coaching. Their names lined up too neatly to be coincidence. Naomi Pierce, Brooke Dalton, Dr. Camille Rhodes, Ethan Park, and Derek. 5 high-income professionals. 5 married or once married individuals. 5 people primed for emotional manipulation. Same structure my father fell for. Same psychological hooks. Just rebranded with protein shakes and yoga mats. Mom came over that Sunday. She walked in with a tote full of groceries and a bad feeling. Mothers sense these things before you say a word. I watched her take one look at me and realized something was terribly wrong. "What happened?" she asked, already bracing. I slid my laptop toward her. For a moment, she didn't speak. She scrolled, her jaw tightening, eyes narrowing. Then she said the name I'd been avoiding, Victor Hale. She said it like a curse, like a ghost had stepped into our kitchen. "He's not dead," she whispered. "Apparently not," I said, "and he's training her." Mom sat down, both hands gripping the edge of the table. I could see her traveling back to the moment our lives imploded. The eviction notice, the shouting matches, me clutching a stuffed bear while she bargained with a cold-faced banker. "I'm going to burn them down," she said quietly, not metaphorically. Ellen Collins meant every word, but I wasn't 12 anymore, and this time, I had the tools: law, logic, evidence, and the trust she fought to protect. My strategy began forming like storm clouds gathering on a crisp horizon. I started small. Data collection, patterns, cross-referencing timestamps with charges. Everything matched. Too well. Monday mornings, Naomi. Tuesday, Thursday afternoons, Brooke. Wednesday evenings, Camille. Friday lunches, Ethan. Weekends, Derek. It wasn't romance. It was resource extraction scheduled like a gym rotation. I didn't sleep much those weeks. My nights blurred into early mornings, living room lights still on at 3 a.m., my fingers stiff from typing. The house smelled like cold coffee and tension. There were moments, small ones, sharp ones, when I questioned whether I should walk away instead of digging deeper. But then Derek would breeze in humming, bragging about new levels of discipline, parroting Tessa's vocabulary like she'd rewired his brain. "You should try one of her sessions," he said once. "Tessa says, you have blocked energy. Blocked energy." The same language Victor Hale once used to convince my father he needed financial realignment. No, I wasn't letting this cycle repeat. Not in my house. Not in my life. Not with my name. The final straw came 2 weeks before the porch incident. I caught Derek standing in the foyer, staring at the framed wedding photo, followed by the house deed pinned behind it, our house deed. He didn't know I was watching from the stairs. He traced his finger over the frame, muttering, "She'll love this house. She. Not me. Not us. Tessa." It was in that quiet moment, no shouting, no affair, lipstick, cliches, just him giving my home away in his own mind, that something inside me solidified. This wasn't betrayal. It was erasure. And I decided I wasn't going to let anyone write me out of my own story. Derek didn't realize yet that I'd already started gathering his lies like evidence in a trial that hadn't begun. He didn't realize his humiliation stunt on the porch would become the opening scene of his downfall. He didn't realize the quiet woman he kept underestimating had been raised by a survivor and had inherited both the scars and the fire. The morning after Derek threw those divorce papers at me, the house felt colder than it ever had. Not physically, just empty in that way a place feels when trust has been scraped out of its walls. I sat at the kitchen island with my cracked coffee cup, watching steam curl from the top like it was whispering the last bit of my old life away. I didn't cry. Not that morning. Not after everything I'd uncovered. Instead, I took a deep breath and opened my laptop. Every file I'd collected, every charge, every location ping, every Instagram post, every LLC document tied to Tessa's scheme was sitting there like ammunition waiting to be sorted. My decision wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a cinematic vow of revenge. It was a contract written in silence. I would stop reacting. I would stop defending. I would stop giving Derek and Tessa the power to define the narrative. From that moment forward, I wasn't the wife trying to fix a marriage. I was the attorney building a case. Phase 1. Observe without confrontation. Let Derek keep thinking I was confused, emotional, blind. Let Tessa believe her operation was airtight. The best trap is the one the target walks into thinking they're in control. Phase 2. Identify the pattern. track the other victims, document timelines, cross-reference charges, build a map of her entire rotation system until I could predict her movements better than she could. Phase 3. Build alliances. Not emotional ones, strategic ones. Naomi, Brooke, Camille, Ethan, and later Laura. Each one brought a different piece of the puzzle. Together, we didn't just have suspicion. We had a web of verifiable fraud. Phase 4. Wait for the perfect moment. The moment when Derek's arrogance, Tessa's overconfidence, and the weight of the truth aligned. The moment confrontation would expose not just betrayal, but the entire structure behind it. My mother warned me once, don't start a war you're not prepared to finish. So I set my rule, my one unbreakable principle. No illegal evidence, no shortcuts, no emotional outbursts. Just truth, collected and delivered with precision. When I closed the laptop, my plan wasn't finished, but my marriage was. The first week after Derek's performance on the porch felt like living inside a quiet storm. No thunder, no lightning, just that heavy air that tells you something is gathering strength. I moved through the house like a ghost, collecting my own life piece by piece, but not to leave. Not anymore. I wasn't packing. I was categorizing. Every drawer I opened, every closet I touched, I'd pause, listen, and ask myself a simple question. What part of this stays with me, and what part was only ever his? It's strange how a marriage can coexist with silence. Derek walked through those days pretending the porch scene had reset the power dynamic, as if I'd be too humiliated to fight back. He'd whistle in the mornings, whistle, like some man in a commercial who just bought a new lawnmower. Meanwhile, I was building a war room. Night after night, the kitchen table transformed into a battlefield of receipts, screenshots, and hand-drawn timelines. My laptop glowed past midnight, reflecting off the stainless steel fridge like a spotlight marking the moment my life pivoted. I made timelines the way surgeons make incisions, carefully, cleanly, without letting emotion cloud precision. By the third night, the pattern was undeniable. Tessa wasn't freelancing chaos. She was running a system. Each client had a role. Each charge matched a play in her script. And Derek was pedestrian in the rotation, not even her top priority. That realization didn't comfort me. It fueled me. Humiliation is hot. Betrayal is sharp. But becoming irrelevant in your own marriage? That's cold. Cold enough to crystallize resolve. Mom came over almost every evening. Ellen Collins entered my house like a general assessing damage. She carried notebooks, highlighters, and that razor gaze that once intimidated mortgage officers. One night, she dropped her bag on the table and sat across from me. "You're not sleeping," she said. I slept a little. When yesterday? Maybe she stared. "Ava, I'm fine." "No," she said quietly. "You're focused. There's a difference." She was right. I wasn't falling apart, I was sharpening. We built the first version of the victim map 2 days later. A massive sheet of butcher paper spread across the living room floor. Names circled, lines connecting bank transfers, timestamps, and social media posts. It looked like a conspiracy theory board. A messy one. "Clean lines, Ava," Mom muttered, redrawing one of my arrows. "If you present this to anyone credible, you need clarity, not emotion." Emotion. I had oceans of it. But she was right. None of it belonged on the board. The breakthrough came when I messaged Naomi Pierce. I didn't know her personally, but her name popped up on 2 invoices marked Executive Coaching. I expected her to ignore me. Instead, she responded at midnight with a single line. "If this is about Tessa, meet me. But not anywhere public." We met at a dim bar near the courthouse, a place so old the leather booths looked like they'd survived several divorces of their own. Naomi ordered bourbon. Straight. No ice. The kind of drink that turns confessions into strategy. "You're Derek's wife," she said, not unkindly, but with that heaviness reserved for recognizing another survivor. I'm sorry." The conversation unraveled from there. Not dramatically. No sobbing. No theatrics. Just 2 women exchanging the kind of truths you only admit when someone else has scars in the same shape. "He wasn't special," she said. "None of them were. That's the point. You think she's repeating a pattern. I know she is." She leaned in, lowering her voice. Tessa doesn't create victims. She collects them. Her words slid under my skin like ice. By the time the bartender flipped the closed sign, Naomi and I had compared charges, texts, and appointment logs. She gave me copies of her email's messages where Tessa had subtly suggested keeping their work off record. "She's smart," Naomi said. "She's coached," I answered. Naomi blinked. "What do you know?" I told her the name that still tasted like rust in my mouth, Victor Hale. Her face drained. "You're joking, I wish. He's behind this. He's behind her." And just like that, Naomi wasn't skeptical anymore. She was in. Walking back to my car that night felt different, like the air had cleared, like the storm was starting to define its eye. The next day, I contacted Brooke Dalton. I found her in her boutique downtown, arranging a table of bracelets that sparkled under soft lights. She looked up when the bell chimed, and for a moment she seemed relieved to see a customer instead of another bill. When I mentioned Tessa, her face tightened like a pulled thread. She said, "Investing in myself meant investing in her program," Brooke said, laughing bitterly. Turns out investing meant wiring thousands of dollars to her consulting partner. Victor. Yeah, Victor. Tall, creepy, silent type. "That's him," she sighed. I should have known. Anyone who praises energetic alignment while checking his watch every 5 seconds is either impatient or a scammer. Brooke handed me screenshots of messages, invoices, and a voice memo where Tessa coached her through a transformational payment ritual. It was absurd on the surface, but underneath predatory. By the time I left, Brooke squeezed my hand. "Get her," she said. "Make it mean something. 2 victims, both manipulated, both certain they were alone until I arrived." The knot in my chest loosened, not because their stories made mine easier, but because suddenly the danger wasn't abstract. It was real, and it was wide. The third conversation was with Dr. Camille Rhodes. She did not cry. She did not shake. She did not crack. Camille was the kind of woman whose posture alone intimidated people, and even through Zoom, she radiated control. But when I laid out the evidence, she leaned back, stunned. "She used my research to lure new clients," Camille muttered, rubbing her temples. I shared it in confidence. "She monetized it." "She's done worse," I said. "And she will again," Camille whispered. When I logged off, I realized something vital. This wasn't a revenge story. It was a containment strategy. Derek was just one casualty. But the system, Victor's system, was the real threat. 4 days into my investigation, the first shockwave hit Derek's life. He came home pale, frustrated, slamming his briefcase on the counter hard enough to rattle a glass. "Rough day?" I asked, stirring my tea. He swallowed thickly. "Someone filed a misconduct inquiry against my team. Corporate wants audits." "Oh," I said softly. "Yeah, something about third-party payments." Total overreaction. He didn't notice me watching him, taking in every twitch of his jaw, every shaky breath. He looked unraveling. Not guilty, not apologetic, just terrified. He was beginning to feel the consequences of standing too close to a fire he didn't understand. And I hadn't even touched the matchbox yet. When I walked away that night, leaving him in the dim kitchen, hands on his head, breathing unevenly, I felt something I hadn't in months. Strength. Not loud, not triumphant quiet, steady strength. The kind that makes you realize you're no longer surviving. You're winning. By the end of that first week, Jordan Miller, one of the junior associates at my firm, noticed something was off. He was young, sharp, and annoyingly observant in the way only people with too much caffeine and too little life experience can be. He stopped by my office doorway on Friday afternoon, leaning against the frame with a can of zero-sugar energy drink. "You're building something," he said. Not a question. "I'm always building something." "No." He smirked. "Not for the firm. For you, I didn't confirm or deny." Jordan stepped inside and lowered his voice. "You want help?" With what exactly? He shrugged. "Data. Timelines. Pattern analysis. You've got that look in your eye like you're connecting dots so fast the rest of us are lagging." I should have said no. But I needed someone who could create dashboards, export data, and make sense of the digital chaos I was collecting. And Jordan, for all his chaotic energy, was brilliant at one thing: organizing information like he was designing a trial argument for the Supreme Court. "I can't tell you what the case is about," I warned. "Don't need to know," he said. "I just like puzzles." And just like that, I had a silent partner. Every night after that, while Derek sat in front of the TV absorbed in some mindless show, I'd slip into the study and send Jordan anonymized data sets, dates, payments, timestamps, no names. Within hours, he'd send back color-coded charts that mapped Tessa's movements so clearly it looked less like coincidence and more like choreography. On the surface, Derek and I were still the flawless Lakewood couple. Inside the house, we were living two different wars. By the second week, the nondescript group chat I'd created under the innocuous name Project Ledger started lighting up constantly. Naomi, filed discovery request template. Brooke, found receipts showing duplicate charges. Camille, confirmed Tessa used her research without credit. Ethan, still silent. Everyone contributed except him. Ethan Park was the outlier, the one who refused to acknowledge he'd been conned. He'd responded to my first message with a defensive paragraph accusing me of intruding on private affairs, the kind of message people send when they're not rejecting the truth. They're terrified it might be right. The breakthrough with Ethan came unexpectedly. It was a Tuesday night. Rain drummed against the windows hard enough to blur the world outside into streaks of gray. Derek was upstairs arguing with someone low enough that I couldn't hear words, just the sharp cadence of a man losing control of a narrative he thought he owned. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something told me to answer. Ava Collins. "Yes, it's Ethan." His voice cracked, not dramatically. Just enough to reveal something was off-kilter. "I need to meet." Tonight, we met in the underground parking structure beneath his office building. The fluorescents flickered overhead, casting everything in that sick, pale glow that makes secrets feel heavier. Ethan stood beside his BMW, shoulders slumped, rainwater dripping from his hair onto his suit. He looked like a man whose world had been pulled inside out. "She lied to me," he said without preamble. "Tessa," he laughed humorlessly. "Who else?" He reached into his coat and pulled out a file actual printed papers, wrinkled from being clutched too tightly. "She said the money I sent was for a business investment, said we'd build something together. Today I got flagged by my bank transfers I never approved. Savings accounts linked to an LLC I've never heard of." I opened the file. The LLC's name hit me like a punch. Delaware registered, obscure, deliberately vague. Victor Hale's signature on the authorization line, and Tessa's name listed as the secondary signer. Ethan's voice trembled for the first time. How stupid was I? I closed the folder gently. "You weren't stupid," I said. "You were targeted." He exhaled, shaky. "A confession I didn't want to believe you," he admitted, "but she drained $36,000. And when I confronted her, she said I was emotionally unstable and needed space. Then she blocked me." His hands curled into fists. "I want in," he said. "Whatever you're building, I want in." That was the moment the puzzle clicked into place. 5 victims became 6. 6 voices became momentum. The next day, our group chat became something else. A coordinated task force, a shared mission, a chain reaction. And while our quiet coalition grew, Derek was coming apart. He stopped wearing his usual immaculate suits to work, switching to button-downs he didn't bother ironing. The circles under his eyes darkened. He drank more. He snapped at the smallest things. One night, I found him sitting in his car long after he'd arrived home, gripping the steering wheel like he was bracing for impact. I stood behind the curtain and watched his silhouette, shoulders hunched, head down. When he finally came in, he smelled like whiskey masked with breath mints. "You okay?" I asked softly. He flinched like I'd stabbed him. "Fine," he said, voice clipped, "just tired." "Long day, they're auditing everything," he muttered. "Client communications, third-party interactions, everything. Do you know how insane that is?" "Very," I murmured. He didn't catch the undertone. He didn't see the web tightening. He didn't realize the audit wasn't random. It was the natural consequence of aligning his fate with con artists. Later that night, I found him sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through his phone, face pale in the screen's glow. Something happened. He shoved the phone away. No, but his hand trembled. That's when I knew. He was hearing whispers. He was seeing the cracks. And he understood, on some instinctive level, that Tessa wasn't the salvation he thought she was. She was a storm disguised as sunshine. Meanwhile, I was reclaiming myself one small victory at a time. I started running again. Quiet dawn runs through Lakewood Heights, where the neighborhood smelled like wet pavement and blooming dogwood. My lungs burned in that good way, the way that tells you you're alive. I returned to my old playlist songs I loved before Derek's preferences swallowed mine. I cooked meals I liked. I slept diagonally across the bed without apologizing. I took back my space, my time, my name, and every time I lifted my cracked coffee cup, I felt something shift. At first, the crack looked like fragility, but day by day, it looked more like a fault line splitting old versions of myself from the one rising beneath. By the third week, the group chat was a hum of activity, a digital heartbeat thrumming with purpose. We were building something larger than revenge, something larger than survival, a reckoning, a coordinated unveiling, a truth so heavy it would crush the entire scheme when revealed. All that remained was timing, and timing, like justice, requires precision. Derek had no idea the countdown had already started. Tessa had no idea her victims had stopped being silent. Victor had no idea his old ghosts had come knocking, but I did. I knew exactly when the confrontation would happen, and I knew it would happen on my terms. Because progress isn't loud. It isn't glamorous. It's the quiet tightening of bolts, the steady gathering of proof, the rebuilding of self until you're no longer the woman they underestimated, but the woman they should have feared. And I had only just begun. Complications never arrive like explosions. They creep in like drafts under a closed door, small, cold, almost unnoticeable until the whole room feels wrong. By the time I realized the next phase of this war had begun, the air in the house felt heavy enough to press on my lungs. It started with an email. A simple, sterile subject line. Cease and desist. Defamation. Harassment. Privacy violations. At 6:12 a.m. While the sun was still soft and pale through the kitchen window, I clicked it open. My coffee went cold instantly. Tessa's attorney, someone from a boutique firm specializing in reputation management, was accusing me of spreading lies, manipulating her clients, and conducting unlawful data collection. The irony was loud enough to make me laugh. A bitter, quiet laugh. The kind someone makes when the absurdity of a threat is almost insulting. Mom walked into the kitchen just as my laughter faded. "What happened?" Tessa found her teeth, I said, sliding the email to her. She skimmed it once. Snorted. "This is intimidation, nothing more." "I know. So why do you look like you swallowed a stone?" "Because even if the accusations were hollow, they came with weight. Because one wrong move, one misstep, and she could twist the narrative, paint me as unhinged, jealous, vindictive. Because in America, the person who screams victim first often gets the microphone." Before I could respond, Derek walked in. Hair messy, shirt untucked, eyes bloodshot. He froze when he saw the email on the screen. "What is that? A letter from your friend's attorney?" "She's not. Ava, this isn't." "Spare me," I said, too tired to let him dance around the truth. He rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand. "I didn't know she was going to do that." "You didn't know a lot of things." He flinched. "Good. That should have been the end of it for the day. But complications don't travel alone." By noon, my phone buzzed with the first rumor. A neighbor, Lindsay Moore, the same woman who once asked me for sourdough starter during lockdown, posted on a private Lakewood Heights group. "Be careful who you trust. Some people spy on their spouses and then claim abuse. Mental illness is real, y'all." The comments spiraled fast. Vague assumptions. Passive-aggressive sympathy. Digital pitchforks, sharpened by people with too much time and too little loyalty. Lindsay must have heard something from Derek. Or Tessa. Or maybe she just liked drama. Lakewood Heights ran on gossip the way cars ran on gas. By late afternoon, Naomi texted me. Someone sent a leak to a financial crime blog. "Your name isn't mentioned, but the details. They're close. Too close." I froze. I hadn't leaked anything. No one in the group chat had clearance to leak anything. So who? Mom. The realization hit like a slap. She wasn't malicious, but she was a mother who had lived through a financial predator and lost everything but her spine. Of course, she'd try to accelerate things. Of course, she'd think leaking would add pressure. That night, I confronted her. "You leaked it, Ava." "Mom, did you?" She closed her eyes. "Yes." Silence, thick enough to wade through. "We talked about pacing," I whispered. "We talked about keeping this airtight. I won't apologize for protecting you." I turned away before anger could spill. Because it wasn't real anger, it was fear. Fear that one wrong step could jeopardize everything I'd built. Fear of looking unhinged or impulsive. Fear of repeating her past. But before I could calm myself, another complication arrived. Derek called me. From the driveway. He didn't come inside, just called from the car like he was scared the walls would listen. "Ava, something's happening at work." "What now?" "There's a rumor going around that I'm under investigation. They think I'm involved in some fraud ring." "And are you?" His voice cracked. "I don't know." For the first time, he sounded like a man standing at the edge of a cliff he didn't see coming. "They're asking questions about Tessa," he said. "About payments. About corporate policies. And someone told HR you've been stalking her." Ah, there it was. The smear campaign. Fast, messy, predictable. "And did you tell them the truth?" "I told them." He stopped, breathing hard. "I told them I don't know what the truth is anymore." That almost hurt. Not because I pitied him, but because beneath the arrogance and the stupidity, Derek had always been someone who needed to believe he was the hero of his own story. Now he wasn't even sure what story he was in. When he finally came inside, he avoided my eyes, not out of guilt, out of fear. And the most dangerous part? He wasn't scared of getting caught. He was scared of being exposed as a fool. That kind of fear makes people unpredictable. Later that night, while I tried to organize the avalanche of new information, Mom sat across from me, arms crossed. "You're shutting me out," she said. "I'm trying to keep this clean. Sometimes clean doesn't win. I'm not becoming you." She stiffened. I regretted it instantly. But the damage was done. We worked in silence after that. Cold, tense. Two women fighting for me in two opposite directions. The storm wasn't coming anymore. It was here. And I could feel deep in my marrow that the next complication would be the one that pushed everything toward the inevitable collision. The next complication didn't arrive gently. It hit like a slammed door, shaking the entire frame of my plan. It was Thursday evening, the kind where the sky turned the color of bruised peaches, purple, orange, heavy. Derek hadn't come home yet, which usually meant he was scrambling somewhere, trying to tighten the loose threads unraveling behind him. I sat at the dining table, laptop open, spreadsheets glowing like warning signs. At 7:43 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown caller, New Jersey area code. I answered, already bracing. "Hello." A woman's shaky breath filled the line. Then, "Ava Collins." "Yes, it's Laura. Laura Mendez. Another victim." Another voice cracking under the weight of shame. She spoke fast, like the words were burning her tongue. I didn't know who else to call. "I found your number from Naomi," she said. You're doing something. What's going on, Laura?" "She's threatening me," she whispered. "Tessa. She said if I talk to anyone, she'll tell my company I violated contract terms. She said she could ruin my job. My life." I closed my eyes. Of course, when charm fails, abusers escalate. "I can't lose my job," she said. "I can't. I have kids. Please don't tell her I talked to you, Laura," I said softly. "You're not the first person she's done this to, and you won't be the last. But you're not alone anymore." A broken sob slipped out of her, tiny and raw. "I believed her," she whispered. "I believed everything she said. I thought she cared about me." This wasn't gossip. This wasn't drama. It was trauma. And the more people came forward, the heavier the responsibility became. I wasn't just building a case. I was becoming the hinge between collapse and survival for people who didn't even know each other. When I hung up, my chest felt tight. This was bigger than Derek's betrayal. Bigger than the porch scene. Bigger than Tessa's faux spirituality. It was an ecosystem of manipulation. A pattern repeating across cities, industries, families. And now they were all looking to me to end it. The next morning, the consequences sharpened. I walked into the firm, planning to work quietly, blend in, pretend nothing unusual was happening. But the moment I stepped through the glass doors, conversations halted. Heads turned. People watched me with a mix of curiosity and fear. Jordan met me halfway. Expression unreadable. "You're trending," he said. I blinked. "What?" He pulled me into his office and shut the door. "Look." He turned his monitor toward me. A blog post. A thread. A rumor spiraling into wildfire. Local attorney under scrutiny after leaking sensitive information in alleged fraud case. My name wasn't printed, but the details? Too close. Too specific. Derek's job. Tessa's coaching. A shadowy female insider tracking payments. Someone wanted me scared. Silenced. Discredited before I could speak. "Who did this?" Jordan asked. "My guess," I said quietly. "Someone who thinks exposure is a weapon. Tessa, or Derek, or someone protecting Victor." It didn't matter who. The intent was clear. I checked my phone, 5 missed calls from Derek. Another from a number marked HR. A text from Lindsay saying, "You should get help. Seriously, before this gets worse." It wasn't concern. It was condescension packaged as pity. Jordan crossed his arms. "You need to get ahead of this." "No," I said, straightening. "I need to finish what I started." But the world wasn't done testing me. That night, Derek returned home earlier than usual. His shirt was wrinkled, tie askew, hair flattened like he'd run his hands through it hundreds of times. He hovered in the hallway like the house might swallow him whole. "Ava," he said. "Derek, we need to talk." I waited. He paced once, twice, then stopped, rubbing his temples. "People at work think I'm part of something illegal," he said. "They think I knew what she was doing. They think you're trying to destroy me." His voice cracked, not with guilt, but with desperation. "They're saying I could be suspended, that clients might pull out, that I violated compliance rules. I didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't comfort." And I asked. He stared like I'd slapped him. "What do you mean? And I mean, what part of this do you think is my fault?" His mouth opened, then closed. I need you to back off." "Back off what? Whatever you're doing." There it was. Fear disguised as blame. Cowardice dressed as plea. He stepped closer. "If you keep pushing this, you'll ruin both of us." "You ruined us," I said, voice calm as ice. "I made mistakes, but this is bigger than—" "Yes," I said, "it is." I walked past him, done with circular excuses, done with emotional detours. But he grabbed my wrist. Not hard, just enough to stop me. "Ava, I'm scared." I looked at him, really looked at him. A man unraveling, a man deceived, a man who didn't realize until too late that he'd been played by someone who never intended to love him. "You should be," I said. I pulled my hand away. Later that night, while updating files, Naomi called. "It's happening," she warned. "What is Tessa's making moves?" She reached out to someone at the Attorney General's office. "She's trying to get ahead of the fallout. She's panicking." Yes. And panicked predators are dangerous. We ended the call with a simple understanding. Time was running out. The window was narrowing. Pressure was building. Everything was converging toward one point. A collision, inevitable and violent in truth, but quiet in execution. And the next complication arrived like a drumbeat. "Naomi, they know. She knows. Everything is accelerating. Get ready." I set my phone down slowly. The collision course was no longer theoretical. It was happening. Now. Tonight. Soon. The storm wasn't circling anymore. It was breaking open right on top of us. And the next step wasn't planning, or preparing, or analyzing. It was confrontation. People think confrontations explode. They imagine screaming, plates shattering, someone throwing a drink like they're in a reality show. But real confrontations, the kind that end empires, the kind that rearrange power, don't start with noise. They start with stillness, a quiet so thick you can hear your own pulse in your teeth. That's the quiet that filled the Lakewood house the night everything collided. It was almost 9 p.m. The sun had dipped, leaving only a faint bruise of purple-blue across the sky. The foyer was lit by the chandelier. Derek insisted on buying during our golden years. A crystal monstrosity, he said, made the house look established. Tonight, that chandelier threw long, fractured shadows across the hardwood floor. shadows that felt like fault lines. I stood at the top of the staircase, hand on the smooth wooden banister, listening to the muffled sound of voices outside. Tires on gravel, doors closing, low whispers, footsteps. The confrontation was supposed to happen eventually. I just didn't expect tonight would be the night everything converged. Then, the doorbell, sharp, echoing, too calm. Derek called from downstairs, "I've got it." But there was something shaky in his voice, something pleading, something close to dread. I descended the stairs slowly. Each step felt like entering a courtroom where I already knew the verdict. From half the staircase, I saw her, standing in my doorway, carrying her duffel bag like she owned the air in the room. Tessa Monroe, her hair pulled into a slick ponytail, leggings hugging her like a uniform of righteousness, a smugness on her lips so polished it almost gleamed. Behind her on the porch were 3 cardboard boxes labeled in marker: kitchen, bedroom, bath. She wasn't here to talk. She was here to move in. My chest didn't tighten. My pulse didn't spike. I felt nothing, just clarity. Derek hovered at her side, face pale, trying to smile like this was somehow reasonable. "Let's just talk," he whispered to her, but it wasn't confident. It was pleading. She brushed past him like he was background noise and stepped inside, right onto the hardwood she once asked Derek to describe during their coaching sessions. Her eyes found me. "Oh," she said, smiling. "You're here." I didn't move. "Naturally," I said. "It's my home." A beat. Her smile twitched. Behind her, I saw movement neighbors lingering at their porches, pretending to walk dogs or water lawns at 9 p.m. Lakewood Heights lived for drama wrapped in HOA-approved silence. And then, my phone buzzed 3 times. In the group chat labeled Project Ledger, "Naomi, we're here. Don't start without us. Camille. Staging outside. Give the signal. Brooke, I brought the files. Everything. Ethan. Let's end this." I exhaled once. The cavalry had arrived. Derek closed the door, locking all 3 of us inside like we were scene partners about to perform the ugliest play of the decade. He turned, voice cracking. "Ava, let's not make this." I raised one hand. He stopped mid-sentence. "Good." Tessa stepped forward, chin high, hands on her hips. "I think we should handle this respectfully," she said. "Given the transition I repeated between you and Derek." She nodded. "This is a new chapter for all of us." Then she slid her gaze up the staircase. Derek said, "The guest room gets great morning light. I'll take that one." My silence must have unsettled her because her smile faltered again. Then came the knock, firm, precise, not hesitant like a neighbor, not frantic like a threat, purposeful. I walked past Derek and Tessa, ignoring the tension trailing behind me like smoke, and opened the door. There they were. Naomi Pierce, blazer crisp, expression carved from steel. Brooke, clutching a document folder so thick it could be used as a weapon. Dr. Camille Rhodes, her presence alone enough to silence a courtroom. Ethan Park, jaw tight, eyes red like he hadn't slept in days. And behind them, Laura Mendez, arms wrapped around herself, shaking but present. 6 faces, 6 stories, 6 broken trust funds, 6 victims, all standing on my porch like an unspoken army. Tessa's face drained of color. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no, what is this?" I stepped aside, letting them in one by one. Not rushing, letting the moment build, letting the truth fill the house Derek tried to push me out of. The foyer felt too small for the weight they carried. It felt like the air thickened with the collective realization of every dollar, every manipulation, every violation. Derek stumbled back, hands raised instinctively. "Whoa, everyone calm down." "Calm," Naomi said, voice slicing the room clean. "You want calm." She pulled a stack of printed emails from her folder. "Calm is what you get before a lawsuit. This," she motioned to the group, "is not calm." Tessa backed up until her legs hit one of her moving boxes. She gripped the edge like it might hold her upright. "I don't have to listen to this," she spat. "You do," Camille said quietly. "And you will." The chandelier flickered. The room breathed. No one moved. Then I walked to the center of the foyer, my house's brightest spot, right under the chandelier, Derek idolized, and turned to face them all. "Tessa Monroe," I said, voice steady. Or should I say, Tessa Hale? Or perhaps Tessa Marrow, since that's the name on your Pennsylvania settlement. Her eyes widened. "You've—" "Yes," I cut in. "I've read everything." Derek's jaw dropped. "You never told me she had." "Of course she didn't," Ethan snapped. Brooke stepped forward, shoving her stack of invoices into Derek's hands. She didn't tell any of us that she and Victor Hale were running a two-person extraction scheme. The moment the name Victor Hale was spoken aloud, the atmosphere changed. It was like a ghost passed through the walls. Like every molecule in the room recognized him. Tessa swallowed hard. "You're all misunderstanding," Naomi laughed. Not kindly, not softly. A sharp, cold laugh. "Lady, you drained 50 grand from me. You called it energetic investment. I call it fraud." Laura's voice came next, quiet, shaky but piercing. "You said you loved me. You said you believed in me. You said helping you was helping myself." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "You stole from my kids." Tessa's mask cracked. Her lips trembled. Her breath shook. But she still tried to stand tall. "You don't have proof," she said. "Actually," I said, stepping closer, "we do." I opened the binder I'd carried downstairs. The Collins family trust binder. The one Derek thought was just a family heirloom. Inside, it wasn't just financial protections, but screenshots, timelines, email headers, LLC registrations, and the smoking gun. Ethan's bank transfer trail, the one he'd confirmed minutes before stepping into my house. I placed the binder on the console table with a soft thud that echoed through the room. "Every document in here leads back to you," I told her. "To your coaching sessions, your retreats, your partnerships, your hidden accounts." And Victor, Ethan added, voice now firm, "Don't forget him." Derek's voice came out strangled. "Victor Hale? Victor Hale? You work with him." Tessa didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence was the confession. Derek staggered backward, crashing into the wall. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Oh my God, what did you get me involved in?" The truth finally hit him like a falling beam. He wasn't the mastermind. He wasn't the hero. He wasn't the lover. He was the mark. And the realization hollowed him. But Tessa didn't crumble. She wasn't the crying type. She was the type who lashed out. "You all think this will stick," she hissed. "You think anyone will believe you over me? Derek and I were building a future. You're just bitter. All of you. Bitter and jealous and—" Camille raised a hand. "No." Her voice was calm, but final. "You don't get to rewrite this." The room tightened. The chandelier hummed faintly. Outside, more neighbors gathered, shadows moving behind curtains and car windows. The world was watching. But this moment wasn't for them. It was for us. For the victims. For the truth. And I wasn't finished. I took one step closer to Tessa, then another, until we were inches apart. Her breath shook. Her eyes darted. Her body leaned back involuntarily. "Good." Then I said the line that began the unraveling. "You built a scheme. You manipulated vulnerable people. You used my husband. You infiltrated my home. But you made one fatal mistake. You chose a target with a lawyer for a wife." And the chandelier flickered again. The moment the words left my mouth, the foyer shifted. Not physically, emotionally. Like something heavy slid into place, locking the room into a new gravitational pull. Tessa inhaled sharply, her shoulders lifting with forced confidence. "You don't scare me," she said. Her voice wavered. Just once. But once was enough. Naomi stepped beside me, not touching, but close-like, a co-counsel approaching the bench. "You don't understand your position," she said coolly. "You're not negotiating. You're cornered." Brooke crossed her arms, eyes glittering with rage she'd waited months to release. "You played all of us," she said. "I thought you were helping me regain control of my business. You emptied my accounts instead." Brooke's voice cracked but didn't break. "If I hadn't met Ava, I would have sold my store because of you." A sharp breath left Tessa's mouth, a tiny flinch, a crack in her armor. "Good." Ethan stepped forward next. His face was stiff, tight, haunted. "You told me we were building something together," he said quietly. "You sold me a dream and left me with overdraft notices." He held up the folder he'd brought. "My wife doesn't know yet. My kids don't know, but they're going to." The ache in his voice was too real, too raw. Laura, trembling visibly, wiped tears with the sleeve of her cardigan. You said I was finally being seen, she whispered. You said I was safe. You said helping you would change my life. She stepped closer, voice sharpening like broken glass. You changed it. All right. You nearly destroyed it. Tessa looked around the room, her gaze bouncing from face to face, searching for an opening, any opening like an animal caught in a trap it thought it built for others. Derek stepped forward then, voice small. Tessa, tell them it's not true. She looked at him like he was a stain on her shoe. It's not my job to clean up your messes, she said flatly. His face crumpled. He had clung to some last strand of hope that she had loved him, or at least valued him, but even that illusion shattered. He stumbled back, like her rejection had punched the air from his lungs. I watched him silently. It wasn't pity. It wasn't triumph. It was closure. A chapter finally ending inside him, but Tessa wasn't done. Even cornered, she still had the arrogance of someone who had manipulated people her whole life. She straightened, crossing her arms like a defiant teenager. You all think you're victims, she spat. You weren't tricked. You were weak. You needed someone to tell you who you were, and I filled that void. She pointed at Naomi. You wanted someone to admire you. At Brooke, you wanted someone to believe in you. At Ethan, you wanted someone to tell you you weren't a failure. At Laura, you wanted affection, any affection. Then she turned to Derek last, and you wanted someone who looked at you like you were the center of the universe. Pathetic, Derek winced. Ethan stepped forward like he might punch her. Camille touched his shoulder lightly, grounding him, and then Camille took her turn. You're right about one thing, she said softly. We needed something, but we didn't need you. We needed the truth. She reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive, setting it on the edge of the console table. My lab's security cameras. You weren't careful. You entered after hours using my badge. You copied documents. We have footage. Tessa's face drained. What? And Camille added. I received confirmation from a federal contact today. They've been watching Victor. They're familiar with his pattern. She paused. And they're very interested in yours. A tiny sound escaped Tessa's throat, barely a squeak. But fear had finally seeped through. I stepped closer, my heels tapping softly against the hardwood. Deliberate, measured, unrushed. You knew this was coming, I said. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you always knew your schemes had an expiration date. You don't have the full picture, she snapped. But it came out weaker, breathier. No, I replied. You don't. I opened the Collins family trust binder fully, flattening the pages with my palm. The house felt so still, I could hear every page slide against the next. You targeted Derek because he was malleable and financially useful. I said you targeted these people because they had money and emotional blind spots. But do you know what the fatal mistake was? She swallowed. Hard what? You targeted someone connected to the person Victor Hale should never have touched. She stared, eyes narrowing as she put it together. My father, I said, you know his name, you know the case, you know how it ended. Silence, dense, ice thick. My father died believing he was worthless, I said quietly. He died thinking he failed us, and I watched my mother rebuild our lives from ashes. I stepped closer. You didn't just pick your marks. You picked your lineage. You picked your predecessor's mistakes. I let the words sink in. You picked wrong, Tessa stumbled back, shoulders hitting the console table, her breath ragged. You're blowing this out of proportion. Victor barely. Don't say his name like you know what he's capable of. I cut in, because I do. The chandelier hummed, swaying almost imperceptibly with the rise in tension. Derek, voice hoarse, finally whispered. So, all this time, I was just another job. Tessa didn't hesitate, yes. Her coldness sliced him open. He staggered like her confession had weight. Then she turned, eyes flashing, and pointed at me. And you? You think you've won? You think anyone's going to care about your little trust or your stupid evidence? People don't care about facts. They care about stories. And I tell the better story. I didn't answer immediately. I let her words hang, let them echo in the room like the last delusional claims of a collapsing con artist. Then I smiled. Not kindly. Not softly. A precise, surgical smile. You're right, I said. People care about stories. I held up my phone, pressed a button, and the foyer filled with voices. Not ours. Hers. Clips. Snippets. Statements. Contradictory promises she'd made to each victim, each one recorded publicly, legally. Her online seminars, her coaching live streams, her exclusive sessions she'd claimed were private but had broadcast errors cached online. Her own words, contradicting each other in rapid succession. Her story, Her lies. Her undoing. Tessa froze, eyes wide. Brooke laughed under her breath. Camille smirked. Naomi nodded approvingly. Ethan exhaled, trembling. Laura covered her mouth. Shocked. I lowered the phone. That was the story you told, I said. This is the story you forgot. I pointed at the group, the collective truth of 6 victims. I pointed at Derek next, the silence of the man you manipulated, and finally, I pointed at myself. And the receipts of the woman you underestimated. Tessa shook her head, shaky and pale. This isn't fair, she whispered. You're ganging up on me. No, Naomi said. We're holding you accountable, Derek whispered, almost pleading. Tessa, say something. Please. She didn't. For once in her life, she had no script. The silence in the foyer became a living thing. Then, a muffled sound outside. Car doors. Several. The crunch of steps. The low murmur of authoritative voices. Tessa whipped her head toward the window. No, she whispered. No, they're not. Someone didn't. But they had. Not because we called them, but because the leaks, the reports, the whistleblower complaint, and the tangled financial transfers had finally caught up. The world doesn't ignore patterns forever. I watched Tessa's face as she realized the game was over. Her cheeks drained of color. Her breathing grew shallow. Her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the table. Then she turned to me with a mixture of hatred and fear. You did this, she hissed. You ruined me. I stepped forward, calm and steady. No, I said, you ruined yourself. I just turned on the lights. The pounding on the front door wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was steady, authoritative, like someone who absolutely knew they belonged on the other side of it. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. The kind of knock that rearranges the air in a room. Tessa stiffened. Her fingers dug into the console table hard enough to leave crescent-shaped dents. Derek whispered, "Oh God." His voice sounded like someone waking up in a nightmare they created. Naomi, calm as a surgeon, stepped toward the window and peeked through the side curtain. "They're from the Financial Crimes Division," she murmured. Tessa's face crumpled in real time, not into tears, into something uglier, rage meeting terror. "You called them," she said, her voice hoarse. Her hand shot out, shaking as she pointed accusingly at me. "You set them on me. No one here called anyone," Naomi said, stepping back to my side. "Not in the last hour. And, frankly, they don't show up this fast for a single complaint," Brooke added. "They've been building a file on you for a while. You just didn't know." Ethan rubbed his forehead, whispering, "Jesus, Tessa, what did you think would happen? You think banks don't notice wire patterns like that?" Laura's voice was higher, trembling. "I wish it didn't have to be like this, but what else was supposed to happen? You stole from us." Tessa pressed both hands into her hair, fingers tangling. Her breath hissed out like she was suffocating. "I'm not going," she said. "I'm not. I didn't. You don't understand what Victor—" Another knock. This one firmer. It made all of us jump, except Naomi. Naomi exhaled. "Ava," she said quietly. "Open the door." There was something about the way she said it, gentle but resolute, that made the moment real, final. I nodded and walked toward the door. My heart was steady, weirdly steady, like my body understood this moment before my mind had time to catch up. I unlocked the deadbolt, turned the knob, and opened the door. 2 investigators stood there, 1 woman, 1 man, both wearing dark jackets with clipped badges. Not dramatic, not movie-like, just professional, controlled, inevitable. The woman stepped forward. "Good evening. We're looking for a Miss Tessa Monroe." Behind me, Tessa made a sound, halfway between a gasp and a sob. The male investigator scanned the room. His gaze was firm but not unkind. "We received multiple confirmations today related to an ongoing case. We're here to ask her some questions." "Some questions?" Tessa spat. "That's what this is? You're going to ruin my life because these losers decided to gang up on me," Camille said quietly. "We didn't ruin anything. You left a trail." The female investigator turned to Tessa. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us. You are not under arrest at this time, but refusing to cooperate may change that status." Tessa shook her head violently. No, I'm not going anywhere with you." She took a step back, then another. Her eyes darted around the room, calculating door, stairs, back, exit, windows. But every direction she looked, she found someone she'd hurt. Brooke, Naomi, Ethan, Laura, Camille, and finally me. Her gaze locked onto mine, filled with venom. "You think this fixes you?" she hissed. "You think this makes you better than me?" "No," I said softly. "It makes me done with you." Derek stepped forward suddenly. "Tessa, just go with them," he pleaded. "You said you didn't do anything wrong. So just explain it to them." Tell them everything's a misunderstanding, she laughed, a wild, broken sound. Oh, Derek, she said, you still think you're my hero? You still think I ever needed you? His lips parted like a wound opening. The female investigator approached slowly. Miss Monroe, please step outside. We can do this the easy way. Tessa's breathing turned sharp and erratic. You can't take me, she said, voice cracking. I know my rights. I know. You know manipulation, Naomi said sharply. Rights? Not so much. Tessa lunged toward the staircase, not a graceful run, not even a frantic sprint, a sloppy, desperate scramble. She made it exactly 3 steps before Ethan instinctively stepped in front of her. He didn't touch her. He just blocked her path. Don't, he said softly. You're only making this worse. She froze. Her chest heaved. Her eyes glistened, not from tears, but from panic. And then something inside her broke. She sank onto the stair, burying her face in her hands. The foyer fell silent except for her ragged breathing. The entire room held its breath. I stepped forward. 1 step. 2. Just enough that she heard my voice clearly. You could have chosen differently, I said. You could have lived honestly. You could have worked for your success. You could have built something real. She lifted her head. Her mascara smudged. Her face streaked. Her expression a cocktail of rage and devastation. You don't get to lecture me, she whispered. You were asleep in your perfect house while I fought for every scrap I ever had. My tone stayed steady. You didn't fight. You stole. You think you're better, she snapped. You think you're smarter. I held her gaze. I think I'm done letting people like you decide who I get to be. Her eyes flickered. A flash of recognition, or maybe understanding, or maybe she just realized this was the last moment she'd ever have any power over me. The male investigator cleared his throat gently. Miss Monroe, it's time. She let out a long, shaking breath. Then she wiped her face with trembling hands, and she stood up, not dignified, not graceful, not defiant, just tired. She stepped past Derek without looking at him. He reached out, not to stop her, but as if hoping for one last touch, one last acknowledgement. She brushed past him like he wasn't even there. Outside, the investigators guided her down the porch steps. The porch light cast a long shadow behind her, stretching across the walkway like a final chapter closing. The door shut softly when they left. The silence afterward wasn't peaceful. It wasn't triumphant. It was the silence after a storm thick with debris, heavy with what's left behind. Derek collapsed onto the bottom step of the staircase, burying his face in his hands. I didn't know, he whispered. I swear to God, Ava, I didn't know, Naomi answered before I could. You didn't want to know. Brooke rubbed her arms, trying to shake off the heaviness. Laura wiped her face again. Camille exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for hours. Ethan stared at the floor. I walked to the center of the foyer, the same spot where Derek had thrown the divorce papers at me, the same spot where Tessa had once imagined she would stand as the new queen of this house. I looked around at everyone, at the wreckage, at the witnesses, at the truth laid bare. And then I said the line that ended it all. This house isn't your battlefield anymore. It's mine again. The room shifted, something released, something settled. Not victory, not yet, but reclamation. Naomi touched my arm lightly. You did it, she said. No, I replied. We did. Brooke sniffled. I can breathe again. Camille nodded. We all can. Ethan finally looked up. Thank you, he said, for not letting her get away with it. Laura hugged herself. I feel stupid anymore, she whispered. I feel free. Slowly, one by one, they gathered their things. They walked out the door, quieter, steadier, lighter, not healed, not yet, but beginning. When the last of them stepped out, leaving just me and Derek in the foyer, the air changed again. He stood slowly, his face a ghost of the man who once smirked on this porch as he threw legal papers at my chest. Ava, he said softly. I'm so sorry I didn't respond. He swallowed. I don't expect anything. I want you to know, I see it now. Everything you tried to tell me, everything you tried to save. I met his gaze calmly. You weren't mine to save. A beat, and I'm not yours to break. He nodded, slowly, defeated, finally awake. I'll leave tonight, he whispered. I know, I said, and I turned away, climbing the stairs with my head high, each step reclaiming a piece of the life he tried to hand to someone else. Behind me, the foyer stayed silent, the kind of silence that marks the end of a war, and the beginning of something else entirely. People always assume the climax is the end, but that's not how real endings work. Not in marriages, not in financial crimes, not in generational wounds. The confrontation was just the explosion. Truth, real truth, arrives quietly afterward, in debris, in paperwork, in revelations that echo long after the shouting stops. 2 days after Tessa was taken in for questioning, I received the first confirmation that the storm wasn't over, it was evolving. It came in the form of an email. Subject line: Hale investigation. Additional inquiry. The federal contact Camille had quietly reached out to was requesting a meeting with me, not for a statement, for documentation. I stared at the screen, the text glowing against the dim light of my kitchen. The same kitchen where Derek used to brag about our perfectly curated life. The same kitchen where Tessa once sent him selfies with my marble counters visible behind her. Now those counters held something else. A line of binders, a laptop, a cup of coffee, and the Collins family trust file. For the first time since all of this began, I opened it fully cover to cover. There were papers in there I had avoided for years, not because they scared me, because they reminded me of the cost my family had already paid. Bank statements from my childhood, foreclosure warnings with my father's name on them, letters from his attorneys after the scam that ruined him, medical bills from the stress-induced heart attack that ended his life, all filed by my mother, Ellen, who'd built a legal fortress so her daughter would never go through what she did. And suddenly, everything clicked into place. It wasn't luck that the trust protected me. It wasn't accident. It wasn't smart planning. It was a wound turned into a weapon. My mother had known exactly what could happen. What would happen? Because she had lived it first. That evening, I drove to her house. She was sitting on the porch, wrapped in her old gray cardigan, sipping chamomile tea like the world wasn't shifting under our feet. "I knew you'd come," she said simply. I sat beside her. The wooden porch creaked. An oddly comforting sound, familiar in a way nothing else felt anymore. "You filed something," I said softly. "The investigators didn't show up randomly. You started this." She didn't flinch. She just nodded. "He was circling again," she said. "Victor. I recognized his patterns a mile away." My heartbeat thudded. "You knew he was involved," I suspected. "You think men like that stop? They don't. They find new prey, new methods, new names." She looked out at the street, eyes distant. "I told myself that if I ever sensed his shadow near you, I wouldn't hesitate." A long breath fell from her lips, so I didn't. I felt something tighten in my chest, not anger, not relief, something heavier, a strange mixture of gratitude and grief. "Why didn't you tell me?" She held her mug with both hands, warming them. "You already had enough to carry, and you were doing it right, carefully, legally, precisely. I didn't want to sway you into crossing lines you couldn't uncross." There it was, the echo of our last argument. Her pushing me to be ruthless, me refusing to compromise my ethics. Both of us protecting something invisible and fragile, our own scars. "I didn't want you to repeat my mistakes," she whispered. "But I also didn't want to lose you like I lost him." And suddenly I understood. Her fear wasn't that the money would vanish. Her fear was that I would. I reached over and took her hand. We didn't cry. We just sat there in the soft, cooling dusk. Two women from the same lineage of war, finally acknowledging the battlefield between us. After a long moment, she said, "What happens now?" I looked out into the street, where porch lights flickered on one by one. "Now," I said, "we finish it." The next morning, the meeting with federal investigators took place in a quiet office near the courthouse. No drama, no shouting, just calm, methodical, unraveling. They asked questions. I answered. They reviewed files. I provided dates, screenshots, financial pathways. At one point, one of the investigators leaned forward. "There's one thing we don't understand," he said. "How did you know where to look? Your documentation is unusually thorough." I didn't tell him the whole truth, that I'd spent years watching a marriage erode and cataloging every micro-lie like it was evidence. That living with Derek had trained me for this. That living as the daughter of a man who'd been destroyed by a scam meant I'd spent half my life preparing to survive another. Instead, I said, "Patterns leave footprints," which was enough. When the meeting ended, the lead investigator stood. "Miss Collins," he said, "your work didn't just help this case. It might open several others connected to the Hale network." My stomach tightened. How many others? We're still counting. Outside the building, the sunlight felt strange brighter, sharper, almost metallic. I wasn't free yet. But something had shifted. This was no longer about Derek, or Tessa, or even me. This was bigger, older, darker, and I was standing exactly where I needed to be. That afternoon, as I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. Voicemail transcribed automatically. "This is regarding your father's case." Please call back. My breath hitched. 20 years late. But truth has perfect timing. The past wasn't done. Not yet. And neither was I. The voicemail sat on my screen like a held breath. I slipped into my car, shut the door, and for a moment the world outside went silent. No traffic. No wind. Just my pulse beating in my ears. I pressed play. A calm, measured male voice said, "This concerns unresolved elements from the Victor Hale investigation in 2004. We believe your father's case may connect to our current findings. Please return our call." My hands tightened around the steering wheel. For years, my father's downfall had been treated like a tragic accident, a cautionary tale, a misplaced trust, a man who made bad business choices, but I knew better. We both did. My mother and I just never had proof. Now, suddenly, the universe was offering it. I called back immediately. The same investigator from earlier answered. "Ava, I'm glad you reached out," he said. "We didn't want to overwhelm you during this morning's meeting." "Tell me," I said. My voice was steady. Too steady. He hesitated, a small pause that told me he was choosing his words carefully. "We found documents during a search connected to the Hale network. Some of those files contain elements that match the structure and timeline of your father's losses 2 decades ago." My stomach dropped. Meaning, he said softly. "Your father wasn't reckless. He was targeted, there it was. The sentence my mother needed 20 years ago. The sentence my father never got to hear. The sentence that rewrote everything." I closed my eyes, letting the truth settle into the bones of my ribs, my collar, my spine. "Will there be charges?" I asked after a moment. "We're pursuing it. But regardless of outcome, we will formally acknowledge his victim status. His record will be cleared." I exhaled, slow, shaky, but steady by the end. "Thank you." When I hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't break. I didn't even speak. I just sat there and breathed like I was inhaling a life I'd been denied for 20 years. Later that evening, I returned home. The air inside felt different, lighter, almost expectant. The foyer no longer echoed with Tessa's screams or Derek's unraveling. It was just a house now. My house. A knock sounded. Not frantic. Not angry. Just a gentle, hesitant tap. I opened the door to find Derek standing on the porch, a cardboard box in his hands. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes hollow. "I came to get the rest of my things," he said. I nodded. "They're in the garage." But he didn't move. "Ava," he said quietly. "I heard from the investigators. About your dad." Of course he had. Word travels fast in Lakewood Heights. "I'm sorry," he said. "Real this time. Not performative. Not manipulative. Just small. For what I asked, for not believing you, for choosing her, for letting you carry everything alone, I didn't soften. But I didn't harden either. I didn't need your belief," I said. "I needed your integrity." He swallowed. "You always were. More than me." "No," I said. "I just didn't let weakness make me cruel." That landed. He flinched like I'd slapped him. After a long pause, he shifted the box in his hands. "I don't know who I am without her." I stepped aside, not for him to enter, but for him to leave. "That's not my job to fix," I said softly. He walked away without another word, the box wobbling slightly in his grip. His figure looked smaller than I'd ever seen it. Not a villain, not a monster. Just a man who'd let his insecurities rot him from the inside. When the door clicked shut behind him, the silence felt like the closing of a steel safe. Locked. Done. Irreversible. I turned toward the dining table, where I'd laid out everything from the trust. For months, those documents had been my armor, my weapon, my evidence. Now they were simply paper again. I sat down, smoothing the final page, a notarized amendment my mother had filed years ago. An amendment with a clause I'd always overlooked. Moral injury voids marital claim. Protection supersedes partnership. Truth supersedes vow. My mother hadn't been protecting money. She'd been protecting me from the very pattern that destroyed our family once before, and I had finally broken that pattern. With slow, deliberate hands, I gathered the stack of papers into a single pile, aligned the edges, pressed them flat, then slid them into a folder labeled Closed Cases. The act was small, quiet, but it reverberated through me like an earthquake. A soft knock sounded again, this time at the kitchen window. My mother stood outside, holding 2 takeout coffees. I opened the door and she entered without a word. She placed 1 cup in front of me, then sat across the table. "So," she asked. "It's done," I said, "but not finished." She nodded knowingly. "You feel different." "I am different. How?" I looked at the folder between us, the folder that held the ghosts of decades, for the first time. Said, "I don't feel like I'm reacting to someone else's disaster. I feel like I'm steering my own life." She leaned back, exhaling with something like peace. You know, she said after a moment, your father used to say you were the sharpest person in any room even as a kid. My throat tightened. Why didn't you ever tell me that? Because, she whispered, I didn't trust myself to repeat anything from that time without bitterness. We sat there in the dim kitchen, 2 generations reclaiming breath that had been stolen. Finally, she asked, what happens next? I closed the folder. Now, I said softly, we stop surviving. And we start winning. I didn't mean it as revenge. Not exactly. It was something cleaner, stronger, sharper. A counterstrike not built on rage, but on clarity. The truth had finally come full circle, and this time, I wasn't the collateral damage. I was the one holding the torch. The strange thing about freedom is that it doesn't arrive with fireworks. It comes in small, almost invisible moments, quiet mornings, soft light, the absence of dread where dread once lived. The week after everything ended, the house felt unfamiliar, not haunted, not broken, just empty in a way that felt new, like a room after you move the furniture and finally see the shape of the floor. I woke up without the weight of Derek's schedule, without the tension of waiting for the next lie to drop, without the constant buzzing fear that something else would collapse if I didn't hold every piece together. For the first time in years, my mind wasn't bracing for impact. The first Monday after the confrontation, I sat at the kitchen island with a new mug, a smooth white ceramic cup I'd bought on impulse. No cracks, no history, just a clean surface and a handle perfectly shaped for my hand. I brewed coffee slowly, not rushing, not already anxious about the day. When I lifted the mug, the warmth against my palms felt like a beginning. Later that morning, I drove to my firm for the first time since the fallout. The office smelled like printer ink and lemon cleaner, the familiar scent grounding me. Jordan spotted me from down the hall and practically jogged toward my desk. You're back, he said, then lowering his voice. How are you? Like, actually how? I surprised myself by answering honestly. Lighter, I said. Stronger. He nodded slowly as if studying my face, recalibrating who I was now. You look it, he said finally. I mean, you look like someone who decided to take up more space. I smiled. Maybe I did. He asked if I wanted help sorting digital files, and for the first time I didn't feel like I was hiding a secret war in my briefcase. I wasn't covering anything up. I wasn't strategizing in the shadows. My life wasn't a crisis management project anymore. It was just life. That afternoon, I told my supervising partner I was resigning. She blinked, stunned. You're leaving? Now, I need to build something of my own, I said. Something that helps people who don't understand the traps they're walking into. There was a long pause. Not disapproval, just surprise at the certainty in my voice. Well, she finally said, if anyone can do it, it's you. And I believed her. I left the firm that day carrying only 2 boxes. One of books and one of files that actually belonged to me. Not to a marriage, not to a lie, not to a war I didn't start. That night, I sat in my living room, the same room where Derek once paced during calls with Tessa, and looked around. The silence felt different now, not suffocating, not accusatory, just present, like a blank page waiting for me to decide what to write. The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm. I renovated a spare bedroom into a home office, painted the walls a warm terracotta, hung framed prints of coastal maps and architectural sketches along one wall. Every brushstroke felt like reclaiming territory, not from Derek, not from Tessa, but from the version of myself who kept living smaller so someone else could feel big. I launched a small consulting practice focused on interpersonal financial fraud awareness. It was a niche field, but one people desperately needed without knowing it. Naomi became my unofficial legal sounding board. Brooke offered branding advice. Camille connected me with professionals in regulatory fields. Ethan provided anonymized financial data to help me build case studies. Laura tested every piece of material I made and told me where the wording made people feel stupid, where it made them feel empowered. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were a team with purpose. Once a month, we met for dinner, not to relive anything, just to exist in each other's lives in a way that felt healing. There was laughter, soft teasing, conversations about work and pets, and terrible online dating matches. Sometimes there were quiet moments too, someone pausing over a forkful of pasta, eyes shining for a second before they blinked it away. Trauma doesn't disappear. It just becomes something that no longer cages you. 3 months after the confrontation, I ran into Derek at the grocery store. He looked smaller, not physically, but in presence, as if ego had drained out and left only the person underneath. He lifted a hand in a tentative wave. I nodded back. There was no bitterness. No heat. Just neutrality. We passed each other in the aisle like two people who had once shared a life and now shared only a distant, polite silence. When I reached home that night, I brewed tea and sat on the porch. My mother joined me, wrapped in her cardigan, 2 blankets draped across our laps against the cool evening air. "Do you feel done?" she asked gently. I thought about it. Really thought, not done, I said finally. Just right. She nodded like she understood down to the marrow. From inside the house, my new mug gleamed on the counter under the soft kitchen, light uncracked, unused by anyone but me. A small symbol. But symbols matter, especially the ones we choose ourselves. Spring came late that year. Or maybe it only felt late because I was finally paying attention to the small things again. The slow thaw of morning frost, the dog walkers out before sunrise, the scent of fresh mulch drifting from the neighbor's yard. Life had texture again. One morning, about 4 months after everything collapsed and rebuilt itself, I walked through the house and realized something shocking. I wasn't listening for footsteps. I wasn't waiting for a slammed door. I wasn't bracing for the next apology that didn't mean anything. My body had finally stopped anticipating impact. I spent my days building the practice meeting clients in the sunlit office upstairs, teaching them how to spot false gurus, predatory coaches, emotional blackmail wrapped in spiritual language, investment scams disguised as empowerment. People came with stories so bruised they could barely tell them aloud, but they left lighter. "Thank you," one client whispered once, clutching her folder. I didn't know I was allowed to question him. "Yes," I said, "you were allowed. You always were." And as I closed the door behind her, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Not just survival. My evenings were quieter. Sometimes I cooked. Sometimes I sat on the porch with a book. Sometimes I walked around the neighborhood just to stretch my legs and exist under the wide, forgiving sky. The house felt different now. No longer like a crime scene. More like a reclaimed territory, with every corner scrubbed of ghosts. One afternoon, Naomi came over with a bottle of wine and a grin that meant trouble. "Big news," she said, dropping her bag onto my table. "Tessa and Victor took plea deals." I raised an eyebrow. "So it's official?" "Oh, very official," she said, pouring us both a glass. The state wanted a clean win. They're admitting to several counts and cooperating on others. Financial restitution, too. I took the glass. Let the moment settle. Not triumph. Not revenge. Just rightness. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said, and I meant it. In the months that followed, the rest of us kept growing in our separate directions. Brooke's boutique expanded. She opened an online store, hired new staff, rebranded with the confidence of someone who finally remembered she deserved good things. Camille got promoted. Her research team published findings that made national news, and she spoke on a panel about ethical oversight in wellness and pharmaceutical crossover spaces. Ethan started going to therapy. Real therapy, not the manipulative kind Tessa sold him. He called me once, just to say, "I'm trying to be better for my kids." I told him I was proud of him. Laura joined a support group. She started watercolor painting. She sent me a small piece, a soft blue wash that reminded her of starting over. I framed it and hung it above my desk. And my mother? She softened. Not in strength, she'd always been strong, but in the way she allowed herself to let me live my own life without bracing for old ghosts. We had dinner together every Sunday. Sometimes we talked about my father, and instead of sadness, there was now something steadier, something closer to peace. One evening, she looked at me over her cup of tea and said, "You did what none of us could do back then, Ava. You ended it, I think." I said I just finished the chapter he didn't get to. She smiled. The kind of smile that bridges decades. And then came the moment I didn't expect, the final sign that everything had truly changed. It happened on a Tuesday morning. A soft breeze drifted through the kitchen window. Sunlight glowed across the counter. I stood there with my new mug, pouring coffee, and for the first time, the house didn't feel like something I needed to defend. It felt like home. I sat at my desk and opened a new document titled Course Module 1, Rebuilding After Betrayal, a Practical Guide. The blinking cursor didn't intimidate me. It invited me. My life wasn't something to escape from anymore. It was something to expand. I typed the first sentence. The end of a relationship is never the end of you. And as the words appeared on the screen, something inside me settled into place. I wasn't the woman Derek tried to break. I wasn't the woman Tessa tried to outmaneuver. I wasn't the daughter frozen by a past she couldn't rewrite. I was the woman who finished what needed finishing, and opened what needed opening. I sipped my coffee from the uncracked cup. A symbol. Yes, but one I chose. The past wasn't erased, It was archived, filed in the closed cases folder of my life. And now I was writing the next chapter myself. On my terms. With my voice. At my pace. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, stick around. Subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Stories like this don't end. They evolve. And so do we.